Hello, thanks very much for coming along to the discussion today about dial art. I have with me today, I'm Cara Mackay, I'm the editor of the Daily Telegraph watch supplement, Telegraph Time. And today we've got Alex Gotbeh from Vacheron Constantin. And Alex is the digital communications expert at Vacheron, and he's also the person who deals with all the collectors and develops relationships with all the collectors, and he knows everything there is to know about Vacheron Constantin. So,
hello, thank you for the presentation.
Once again for the final time, and I invite all those guests who wish to attend the first of this afternoon's lecture theatre presentation entitled Dial Art, which is a discussion between Cara Mackay, who will be talking to Alex Gotbeh of Vacheron Constantin on the Metier Art Studio. Could you please now make your way to gallery number 10, which is situated on the first floor. Enjoy your afternoon.
thank you.
Fantastic. We've got two introductions. Well, thank you so much for inviting me, Cara. I'm delighted to be here. I'm not sure I know everything about Vacheron, but would be more than happy to discuss and have a...
Well, I think what I'd like to just start by saying is that the reason that I'm hosting this talk is because one of the reasons that I got into watches was because I'm not particularly... So I don't get so excited about the movements or what actually a watch contains, but I really, really feel passionate about watch dials. And I think most people who wear a watch, it's the thing that they look at most. And there's just so much to learn about watch dials that generally people don't know. So Alex has been working for Vacheron, who employ many of the great watchmaking arts on their dials. And I'm going to ask Alex to tell you how he got involved in this in the first place, because it's actually quite a nice story. So Alex, tell us how you became involved with Vacheron.
Well, I've been in the watch industry for a very few years, only 3 years. In fact, before I used to be a lawyer. I did financing, but I was fascinated about watches. And for fun, a few years ago, 10 years ago, I started a Vacheron Constantin discussion forum on a site called The Purists. From then on, I created another discussion forum especially for Vacheron Constantin called the Hour Lounge, which is the in-house Vacheron forum. And this was for fun. I did this on weekends and evenings. And at one point, I used to live in Paris and I got an offer to go to New York. And I called up Vacheron saying, okay guys, I'm sorry, but you'll have to find somebody else to take care of the forums because I just can't do this anymore. And they said, no way, please join us, come work for us and take care of the digital communications. And basically I thought about it 5 seconds. It was like, if you ask a kid if he wants to go work at Disneyland. So I moved to Geneva and working with Vacheron ever since. And it's not even work. I love it.
So I think the fact that you did that just kind of it kind of shows the passion that so many people have for watches and how involved they get. But I mean, you actually ended up working. You moved to Geneva from Paris, which I can't quite believe. I think that shows how dedicated you actually are. But getting back to the whole dial art discussion, when we talked this morning, you were talking about the divas in the...
At Vacheron Constantin, we have a special workshop called the Métier d'Art, the Fine Crafts. This workshop, they're slightly apart in our Geneva manufactory. They have a beautiful ateliers overlooking the Green Park.
Where is the atelier, Alex?
In Plan-les-Ouates, which people often refer to Plan-les-Watches, because basically all the Geneva watch manufacturers are based there. It's right on the outskirts of Geneva. And we have an atelier which has been open for the past 4 or 5 years. And we have one artisan or one artist representing each of the crafts which we work with. We have a gem setter, we have an enameler, we have an engraver, and we have a guillocheur who makes patterns on cases and dials. You talked about dial art. Our artisans do not only work on dials, even though most of their work is on dials, but there's also a lot of casework or work on in enhancing the decoration of movements, for example, like our engraver.
I think it's quite interesting to talk about how there's been a real sort of revival in extraordinary dials, and You said at one point in the 50s and 60s, basically, it kind of died out, the whole sort of traditional arts that are about 200 years old.
I think we should just take a step back. It's almost impossible to dissociate Geneva from decorative arts. Enamelers, engravers have been in Geneva since the 15th, 16th century, way before watchmakers were there. And when the Geneva watchmaking tradition started, the industry, immediately they worked with these artists to create, decoration on movements, on cases, on dials. And this went through mostly in the 1920s. That was the greatest years. It was the Art Deco. Out to the 50s. And after the 50s, tastes changed. There was time of industrial design, a more sleek Bauhaus, no frills look. And a lot of these artists, in fact, stopped working. They retired and they started disappearing. And at one point in time, there was maybe just one or two enamel artists in Geneva. And one thing we shouldn't forget is you don't learn any of these crafts in school. There are artisans who take apprentices and teach them their craft. And after 3, 4, 5 years, the apprentice can actually go and work by himself. That's how it works.
There are actually no specific schools, even still in Geneva, to learn these crafts. There is no art school dedicated to this, although it's a major part of the industry.
No, all our artisans actually went to art school. They studied fine arts, and after that, they went and worked with a master to teach them their specific craft.
So should we talk a bit about the specific crafts?
Sure. These are just a few examples of pieces made by Vacheron Constantin in the past, representing the different arts. In fact, Jean-Marc Vacheron, who's the founder of the brand in 1755, his very first pocket watch, which is the one you see here, actually had an engraved movement balance cock. So very first, from the very beginning, there was a very tight relationship between the watchmakers and the artisans. So I was talking to you about our divas, or our very special artisans who are in Geneva. One of them being the gem setter. Now, a gem setter actually, well, as you can guess, transforms a watch into more than just a watch, a jewel. And interestingly, Vacheron, as a watch brand, actually developed a special cut for diamonds. It's the one you see in the middle. It's called the Flame Cut. It's the only brand actually using it in its watches.
How did that come about? Why did they develop this particular style of cutting?
We have our artisans, and they have their ideas. They know how to work. I mean, they're not watchmakers. And we work with them, and they came out with this idea of a specific cut, which would even give more light to the diamond. This diamond actually has 57 sides to it. Then and it catches light in a special way. So
it's designed to sort of give the fullest effect of the light.
Exactly, and I think we have some examples. For example, the one in the middle. It's a watch called the Lady Flame Cut, Kala Flame Cut.
Which era is this watch from, Alex?
This is from 3 years ago. It's very recent, yes.
And how popular today are designs like this? Because they seem, to me, they kind of seem a bit sort of 1950s, 1960s.
Most of our watches, which use the métier d'art, are mostly made for bespoke pieces. They're custom pieces. They're one-man team. We have one guillocheur, one enameler, one engraver, and there's just so many pieces they can work on. So they rarely, if ever, work on what we call regular production. They work on one-off pieces.
Can you because you work with the collectors so much, and you say that so many of these one-off pieces are are requested bespoke pieces. Can you basically, most of us would never get the chance to see them because they go directly.
Well, unfortunately, the problem with collectors is often they order a bespoke piece, but they never want it to be seen.
But why do you think they don't want it to be seen? I mean, it's such a wonderful, sort of extraordinary thing.
I think collecting is a very private affair, and some just want to keep it to themselves. Luckily, there's two watches I can actually show you which were bespoke and each used a métier d'art.
Be nice to talk about those, I think.
Sure. One of them is in the engraving. Would like to show you. It's probably one of the world's most complicated timepieces, which is called the Vladimir. Just some history. In 2005, Vacheron Constantin, for its 250th anniversary, launched a watch, which at the time was the world's most complicated watch with 16 complications, called the Quai de Lille. The owner of one of the Quai de Lille, only 7 were made, actually wanted something more complicated and unique. And he ordered in 2006 a time watch which would have more functions. And we created this watch for him called the Vladimir. It's the owner himself who gave the name to the watch, which has 17 complications, more than the Tour de Lille. And one of the interesting parts is the case is hand engraved by our engraver, which is here, and you can go visit her, and she'll show you how she works, by the 12 signs of the Chinese zodiac. And she actually engraved onto the case. And one thing which should be underlined is there's no room for error in this type of craft, because if you miss anything, you're taking away metal. You have to start. Not only you have to start over again, you actually have to bring out a new case. So it's very, I think it's painstaking. It's a delicate work.
We were talking about the fact that the whole nature of watches is such a painstaking exercise, but actually, more than anything, it's a very, very human endeavour. So we were talking about the sort of human touch and the human skills, and you were saying that when an engraver or an enamelist works on a piece, sometimes you can tell what mood they've been in that day.
Yes, on the test. Well, they're human, and it's, you could be in a good mood, you could be in a bad mood, you can have a good day, and you can sometimes feel on some of their test pieces how they were feeling that day. Sometimes you have bright colors, beautiful round movements, and you know that the person working on that piece was having a good day. Sometimes you feel these tight lines, straight and very tortured, and you know that that was not a good day for them. And you can feel that. You can see that.
So I quite like the fact that there are tortured artists in watchmaking as well as any other sphere, because
I guess all artists are somewhat tortured.
On that theme, can we talk about the Chagall watch? Can you tell us a bit more?
Let me just show you the photo of this. These are just a few examples of engraving on the movement, but I think the best would just be see our engraver and the way she works. Let me just go through this quite rapidly. Here we also
do try to see the engraver. It's an amazing thing to see.
This is just an example of a watch we had made, which used engraving as a sculpture, called the Masks. In Geneva, there's a museum called the Barbier Muller. It's the world's biggest private collection of primary arts. And we have a partnership with that museum. And we took the masks from some certain masks, African, Asian, American masks from the museum, reduced them to 2 millimeters, and all hand engraved miniature sculptures and placed on a dial. This was in 2008 and was one of the watches which got the most press from Vacheron Constantin at the time. Now, to show you the Chagall, which is part of the Guilloche, we also have our Guilloche artist, which is here, and he can actually show you how he works, and you can try using the machines which he's working on, which are often machines from 100, 150 years ago. So, let me just go rapidly to the Chagall, so at least you can see it. Just to tell you the story behind the Chagall, Vacheron Constantin has a partnership with the Paris Opera. And for the 30th anniversary of the Association of the Friends of the Paris Opera, it was decided to make a watch, a special, unique piece for the opera. There it is. For the opera, and auction it and give the funds to the opera. So it was decided to recreate on a dial the painting on the ceiling of the Paris Opera, which is done by Marc Chagall, which represents 12 composers and 12 pieces from the composers. After we saw the final watch, I don't know if you can, it was before or after, there it is. Once we saw the final watch, we decided that it was so beautiful and it would be a shame to actually auction it and have it locked up in a private collection. We decided to keep it, and gave the funds to the Paris Opera anyway. There's two interesting things on the dial. It's called miniature painting on enamel. The artist actually uses a brush with two hairs on it, two marten hairs, and applies color, heats the dial, comes back, adds on another color, and so on, and so on, and so on. And the problem with enamel is it's living, and it goes into heat. You cook enamel, and you can use blue, but blue, once heated, can actually be red. And after 3 seconds, it can turn yellow. So it's a really trial and error process. It's just it's a talent. It's an expertise you can only get by making many years of dials and work.
I think the lady who did this one is Anita Porsche.
Porsche is one of the rare enamel artists which are still alive and working. It took her close to 4 months to make the dial, just one dial. And when the dial was finished, we needed to engrave the faces of the 12 nymphs, which are also sculpted in the Paris Opera ceiling.
Can you tell us about the lady who did that? Because
she's here, and she actually has the test piece. She'll show it to you. But she had a week to do it. Each engraving, each nymph, has a different expression, and she had to recreate those expressions on a 2mm surface. So she locked herself up for close to a week. Nobody could talk to her. Nobody could even walk in front of her workshop. And she engraved, when she finished the job, she gave the dial. And what's extremely stressful for her was that if she missed out anything, if the whole dial would have been destroyed, would have been taken back to the enameler to redo, and the watch needed to be delivered to the Paris Opera 2 days after. So she finished doing that, but she came out such a nervous wreck that she actually took 2 weeks of vacation in some island to relax. Yeah, it was she'll tell you about it. For her, it was hell. She said, "I'll never do that again."
But even, I think the thing is, although they're experts at what they do, they're constantly being tested with projects like this, and in a way that is keeping these really ancient arts alive and modern and contemporary.
Well, as I was saying, there are no schools to learn these crafts. There's hardly anybody left to actually even teach these crafts. That's one of the reasons why Vacheron Constantin decided to take them in-house, put an atelier up, so these people could actually work, and they're very free to create their own designs. We have a watch which is also exhibited here, which is a skeleton perpetual calendar, which is engraved, or the whole movement is engraved. And the engraving design was done by an engraver who one day decided that she really liked the arches of the Eiffel Tower, and she recreated that on the movement. So they have a huge amount of freedom of expression. They are artists. Even though they're working on mechanical objects, they are artists.
But how does that work then? Because they are mechanical objects, and I think to bring artisans together with engineers is never an easy task, really. I mean, how do they work together? How easy is it? How difficult is the process?
Well, other than engraving, the artists never touch the movements. So our engraver does have an understanding of mechanics because she's actually removing metal from a movement. Almost a third of the metal of a watch movement can be taken away when engraving a movement and creating a skeleton watch. And she understands that technical bit, so she's always very careful. The others, they work on cases and mostly on dials. So they're always removed from the purely technical side, yes.
It seems like quite a good idea, I think, to do that in some ways.
I think maybe engineers and artists don't always cope well.
So just now, there is a huge appetite for enameled pieces and for very, very intricately worked dials. Can you tell us a bit more about what the collectors say to you, or what their why this sort of, current enthusiasm?
In fact, there are two kinds of collectors. We have collectors which are only interested in and systematically, all of antique watches, they had some kind of artistic craft involved. Maybe engraving, often the case backs were enameled, guillochage, and they are extremely interested to see how this art has developed through time. The more modern collectors are interested in wristwatches, and the expression of the artist's work on the dial is always a big plus for them. And especially since they can actually order watches, bespoke watches, there's a bit of themselves in the watch that they order, and that's a big plus.
Can you tell us about any pieces that you know that have been ordered that, you know, with specific requests? I mean, I know you talked about...
Well, there was the engraved piece, I saw you the Vladimir. We do have a lot of, for example, the Chagall piece. It was decided after we decided to keep the unique piece, to create 12 unique models, each representing one of Chagall's composers. So we have for example, the yellow parts up there you see are Adam's Giselle and Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake. And we made 2 watches, and they were going to make 12 watches, and through the next 3-4 years. So these are all unique. And just a story on the Chagall piece. A collector one day calls me up asking if the Beethoven dial would be available. I'm like, sure, but you know, I can't show you anything. He's like, no, it's for my mother, who loves enamel, not watches. She didn't know anything about watches, and loved Beethoven. And he wanted to offer it to his mother. And his mother actually came to Geneva, visited the factory, and all of a sudden discovered watchmaking. So, in fact, some of our collectors don't know anything about watches. They're more attracted to the artistic side, but actually understand and discover watchmaking after.
I think that's the thing about dials. I think, you know, most of us just automatically connect with what we see. And I think that is the great thing about the dial art, is that it brings everyone into the story. And I also think because collectors are so many of them are so secretive, it actually enables us all to share in the story. I mean, particularly in the Chagall pieces.
Collectors are secretive, but often when they are amongst each other, I mean, you saw outside, we were having coffee earlier on.
To sit with Alex outside, it was like flies. Just all these people kept coming, and it was like all these collectors all of a sudden. Sort of.
And you know, they were amongst themselves, and they were all having lunch, and each had a bag with 5 or 6 boxes, each with their watches, so they could. So collectors are often a stranger breed. They can be extremely secretive, but once they're amongst themselves, they're always happy to share.
And do you think the kind of people that are having these pieces, these kinds of very, very exceptional pieces made, do they talk to each other?
A lot of them, yes, because one gets a piece and his friend thinks, oh, what a beautiful piece, I want one like myself. Yes, they share, but they always share amongst themselves, because sometimes collectors fear that people don't understand them and can't understand how they can spend so much money on just a timepiece.
Can you give us some idea what kind of price these unique pieces might have to sell for to a collector?
It's really difficult because it depends on the work. I can say that the Vladimir, which we saw, which was the most complicated watch we have made up till now, with engraving, that watch was sold for 2.5 million francs. But it's a unique piece developed especially for that. But not all are that expensive.
I think it would have to be quite unique at that price. But I think that also reflects the amount of man hours that go into something like this.
It's also, today we're living in an era of personalization. Everybody wants to have something personalized. I mean, even Nike offers you a possibility to create your own sneakers. So it just shows how it's in the era, it's in the epoch. And we're talking about what it could cost, but a personalization, you can use an engraver, for example, to engrave your initials on the case back, or have the side of your watch case guilloché. So that's probably not going to cost you millions, but it allows you to have a unique piece which is individualized.
And you think that's happening more and more, that people do. They want more bespoke pieces that they're involved in, and I think also the fact that they can be involved in the story by sort of designing part of it in a way.
And, I mean, when somebody wants a bespoke piece, and a lot of the bespoke pieces are actually enameled or art pieces, they meet with our designer, the head of design, and they sit together and decide what they want and what exactly that person wants. And we've had people who, for example, an Indian client wanted to have the representation of a god, of a goddess on the dial. Somebody wanted to have an engraving of the face of his child on the case back. So yeah, a watch is a personal object. You have it on your wrist almost 14, 15 hours a day. You look at it 100 times a day. It's probably one of our closest and personal objects. So everybody would want to have something personalized which truly reflects what he or she is.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think that's absolutely it. But the other thing I wanted to ask you was, people keep talking about the Chinese market and how, enameling and all these sort of dial arts are sort of being, revived by the sort of buoyant Chinese market. But I think there's always been such a tradition for all these arts and crafts. I mean, do you think it is simply the...
No, because, historically, a lot of these enamel pieces, even from the 1800s, were made for the Chinese market and often had scenery of the Geneva Lake or the Geneva countryside because what people wanted. Throughout most of the 20th century, there was not much of a Chinese market. And still brands and Vacheron Constantin restarted making enameled watches in the early 1990s, right after the end of the quartz crisis. And there was no Chinese market then. So I think part of it is just traditional and history and wanting to revive arts. Because if in the 90s Vacheron Constantin hadn't used these artists, there would be no more enamel artists today to be able to sell anything to China. Obviously, the Chinese are interested in these kinds of crafts and arts because historically that's what they had. But it's not only the Chinese, the Europeans have a huge appetite for these kinds of pieces as well.
In France, in sort of...
Everywhere. I can't give you specific countries or special, but we've had Italian, German, French clients who are also, yes.
So it's just there's always an appetite for it there?
I think there's always appetite for exceptional pieces which only the human hand can make. And who are true works of art. There's so few true works of art today. Very few objects which only the human hand can make. That yes, there is an appetite for that everywhere, and not only Chinese.
China. Can we talk a little bit about guilloche? Maybe for people who don't know much about guilloche, can we talk about...
Move back, yes.
Because we talk about enamel quite a lot in these things, but I think guilloche is sometimes a bit overlooked as a craft.
Okay, guilloche is in fact an ancient tradition of cutting patterns in metal. It was used to create patterns on watch cases and on watch dials. Once again, our guilloche artist uses tools, machines from the 1800s, which he uses to cut out a specific pattern on the dial. Now, one thing which is interesting, and you will see you see him work, and he can actually show you, and you can try to do, and you see how complicated it is. Our guilloche artist, he's not an artist. He's a sorcerer for me. It's amazing what he does. A guilloche machine either makes straight lines or semicircular lines. He actually manages to draw on these lines. For example, these dragon pieces. Each dial takes almost 2 months to make. And he works under a microscope, cutting away, making tiny little circles, then straight lines, then circles, then straight lines. And he comes out with this, which is quite amazing. So once again, our guilloche artist does not make, he doesn't work on the dials on our regular production pieces. He's a one-man team. He makes maybe 20, 30 dials a year maximum. So it's always reserved for one of our special bespoke pieces or very limited edition watches. These watches were only available in our Vacheron Constantin boutiques, and only 9 of them were made.
And do they all sell? When they, you know, obviously just 9 are made, but do they all sell quite quickly?
They sold quite fast. Very
Yeah.
few people actually saw them in the stores. And you were coming back to the Chinese market. You would think that if we're making dragons, it's mostly for the Chinese market. Most of them went to Europe and the US.
Did they? That's quite interesting.
But I can only, you know, urge you to go see them work, because talking about them is something, and seeing them work, and seeing how difficult it is once you try, when you put your hand on that, it's pretty amazing.
Would anyone like to ask Alex anything? Or if you don't want to, you can actually go to the Vacheron Constantin booth and talk to the engravers and meet people. I think it's a really, really nice thing to do.
And we actually, it's one of the rare times the Chagall piece has left Geneva, and it's on exhibition on our booth. I think it's definitely worth to see.
Yeah, I think try and see the Chagall watch. It's really an amazing piece. Well, Alex, thank you so much.
Thank you, Cara.
It's been really great to hear all your stories, and yeah, do grab Alex, because he has got wonderful stories. So try and have a chat with him too. Thank you.
Thank you very much.